He took credit for my 2 years of work. When the shareholders met me, his face went pale. My hands shook under the conference table as Mark Hensley stood before the shareholders, presenting my entire 2-year project like it was his personal achievement. I watched the executives nod and smile as he spoke about my vision and my innovation. The applause filled the sleek boardroom, and it felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I had given everything to this project, countless nights, weekends sacrificed, ideas that kept me awake at 3 in the morning. Now, watching him bask in the glory, I understood what betrayal truly meant. The CEO stood up and shook Mark's hand firmly, calling him the future of innovation. My future. My work. My ideas. All his now. If you're enjoying this story so far, please take a moment to like and subscribe to get notified of our new series. The meeting ended, and Mark leaned over to me with a smirk playing at his lips. Teamwork, Emily. That's what this is about, he whispered. I felt my stomach drop. He was gaslighting me right in front of everyone, and the worst part was that everyone believed him. That night, I sat at my computer, scrolling through my project files, my heart racing. Then I noticed something strange. My access was gone. My login credentials were revoked. Every file I had created, every line of code I had written, every design I had perfected, suddenly locked behind a wall I couldn't breach. I flashed back 2 years to when everything started. I remembered pitching my predictive analytics tool to Mark with genuine excitement. He had smiled and said, "We'll build it together, Emily. This is your dream." I believed him then. I had believed in his support, his mentorship, his vision of us growing together. We spent months planning the framework, designing the algorithms, testing the prototypes. He seemed so invested in my success. Or so I thought. But looking back now, I could see exactly when things changed. When small compliments started turning into subtle claims of ownership. Over the next few months, Mark's behavior shifted from mentor to manipulator. He started insisting that I copy him on every communication, every email, every update. Then, during team meetings, he would present my reports as his own discoveries. When I raised concerns to HR, they dismissed it as miscommunication and suggested I was being too sensitive. I felt my faith in the system crumble. So I started documenting everything. Every date, every stolen idea, every presentation where my name vanished and his appeared. I kept detailed records on my personal computer, building a timeline of theft that I prayed I would never need to use. Finally, the project was complete. It was magnificent, a fully functioning predictive analytics tool that could revolutionize how the company made decisions. Mark called me into his office and said casually, "Let me handle the presentation, okay? Executives like a simple summary, and you know how they can be." I hesitated, doubting my instincts, but I agreed. I thought he would credit me. I thought he would at least mention my name. I was so naive. The boardroom applause that followed felt suffocating. He called me only a valuable assistant in his closing remarks. A valuable assistant. As if I had simply fetched coffee and organized files. The next morning, my inbox exploded with congratulatory emails. Every single one was addressed to Mark. My name wasn't mentioned once, not even as a footnote or acknowledgement. I felt something inside me snap. I confronted Mark at his desk, my voice shaking with rage. He leaned back in his chair, completely unbothered, and said, "That's how this industry works, sweetheart." Those words hit harder than any punch. The casual dismissal, the condescension, the assumption that I should just accept this injustice. But instead of quitting on the spot, I did something different. I deleted my resignation draft and started planning something else entirely. I decided to stay, but not as his victim. I would stay as his nemesis. I began systematically archiving everything, my project timelines, source code commits, email trails, meeting notes, design documents. Every piece of evidence that could prove this work was mine. I encrypted everything onto a private drive and stored it safely at home. Mark had no idea what I was doing. He walked around the office with his head held high, accepting praise that belonged to me, basking in promotions and bonuses that should have been split between us. But his confidence was about to become his greatest weakness. One afternoon, I overheard a conversation between two accountants in the break room. They were discussing something that didn't add up. The project's expenses seemed inflated. Mark had built software licenses that never existed, proprietary tools that were actually open source. I felt my blood run cold. He wasn't just stealing credit. He was siphoning company money. This wasn't just professional theft anymore. This was fraud. I started digging deeper, finding invoice after invoice with his signature, vendor names that led nowhere, and expense reports that didn't match any actual purchases. I reached out to Jessica, an ex-colleague who had quit the company years ago. Over coffee, she revealed a painful truth. Mark had done this to her too. He had stolen her design work, gotten her fired on false pretenses, and then taken the promotion that should have been hers. She never fought back because she didn't have proof. But she had something almost as valuable. She still had archived emails. Together, we realized we weren't alone. We decided to work together quietly, building a case that Mark couldn't escape from. Jessica introduced me to others Mark had wronged over the years. There was an IT specialist who had been blamed for a system failure Mark actually caused. There was a client representative who remembered Mark presenting Jessica's design as his own. There was even a dismissed intern who still had access logs from the network. We formed an informal alliance, what I called the Ghost Team. We met in secret, sharing documents, comparing timelines, and building an irrefutable wall of evidence against Mark. The IT specialist was particularly helpful. He showed me server logs proving exactly who had written every line of code in my project. With our evidence compiled, I walked into HR with my heart pounding. I laid out everything we had discovered, the stolen work, the financial discrepancies, the pattern of manipulation. The HR director listened, nodded, and then dismissed every single claim as speculative and unsubstantiated. I later learned that Mark played golf with this HR director every Friday. Justice wasn't going to come from within the system. The system was broken. I left that office defeated, but more determined than ever. If they wouldn't listen to me, I would make sure someone else did. That's when a sympathetic intern slipped me a flash drive during lunch. I didn't recognize her at first, but she whispered, "This might help." Mark doesn't know I kept these. That night, alone in my apartment, I plugged in the drive. My hands trembled as I opened the files. Inside were internal video recordings from Mark's presentation preparation sessions. In one clip, he sat at his desk, rehearsing my entire speech word for word. He was reading directly from my original draft. He was even practicing my inflections and gestures. That video was worth more than gold. That video was proof. I later discovered that the intern was actually the CEO's niece, working anonymously to learn the business from the ground up. She had been horrified by what she observed happening to me. She decided to take a risk and help me reach her uncle directly. The CEO had no idea what his company had become, what his trusted manager was doing. She arranged a meeting for me, but it couldn't happen immediately. We had to be strategic. Instead, the CEO scheduled a major shareholder review, a presentation where Mark would showcase all his innovations and secure his position even further. That's where we would strike. For weeks, I played it cool. I attended meetings, smiled politely, and acted like nothing had changed. Mark became even more arrogant, bragging to the team about his visionary leadership and his plans for even bigger projects. Meanwhile, I perfected my documentation. Every timestamp was verified. Every file history was organized. Every proof was organized and cross-referenced. The CEO's assistant sent me an email inviting me to the shareholder session as technical support. My heart skipped a beat. They were inviting me into the room. They were inviting me into my own reckoning. Mark was ecstatic about the upcoming presentation. He practiced his speech, polished his slides, and imagined announcing his next big initiative. He had no idea that I would be sitting in that same room. He had no idea that his entire world was about to collapse. The morning of the shareholder meeting, I arrived early and sat quietly at the back of the boardroom. My flash drive was in my pocket. My documentation was in my bag. My heart was pounding as Mark took the stage. He started his slick presentation, full of confidence and charm. Everything was going exactly according to his plan. And then the CEO interrupted him mid-speech and said calmly, "Emily, could you walk us through the original prototype file? If you haven't already, now is the perfect time to like and subscribe for more shocking stories." I stood up and plugged in my drive with shaking hands. One by one, I opened version histories showing my authorship, creation dates, and my detailed comments from every stage of development. The shareholders leaned forward, studying the evidence carefully. Mark's confident grin faded like ice melting in the sun. His face turned pale. The room filled with murmurs of concern. I could see the exact moment when he realized everything was over. The CEO turned to him and asked in a cold voice, "Mark, why is your name missing from every single file?" Mark stammered and stuttered, blaming everything on team collaboration and system bugs and miscommunication. But I calmly played the internal video clip, the one where he sat alone, rehearsing my presentation word for word. The silence that filled the room was deafening. Shareholders exchanged meaningful looks. Some shook their heads in disgust. The woman sitting in the front row spoke first. "We've seen enough," she said firmly. Other shareholders nodded in agreement. I watched Mark's face crumble as he finally understood that there was no escape, no excuse, no way to talk his way out of this. After the meeting ended, Mark tried to corner me in the hallway. He demanded that I fix this and threatened to ruin my career. But before he could finish his threats, security escorted him out of the building. HR called an emergency session to clear me of all accusations and confirm that the stolen work was indeed mine. The CEO personally sought me out afterward. He looked genuinely ashamed and said, "Emily, we failed you. We should have listened." Then he made an unexpected offer. "We'd like to offer you Mark's position as Director of Analytics. You've more than earned it." The job offer sat on my desk for days. I thought about accepting it. Part of me wanted to reclaim my position and finally get the recognition I deserved. But another part of me was exhausted by the toxicity I had experienced. I asked for a week to think about it. That same night, a recruiter from a rival tech company emailed me out of the blue. Word traveled fast in this industry. They wanted to meet with me. I decided I had nothing to lose by listening to what they had to offer. I visited the rival firm the following week. It was smaller than my current company, but something about it felt right. The environment was transparent and progressive. The employees seemed genuinely happy. And then I saw a familiar face in the office. It was Jessica, my ex-colleague. She was thriving there, leading her own team, proud and confident. She smiled at me knowingly. The CEO of the rival firm offered me double the salary and complete creative freedom to build something new. I felt something inside me shift. This was where I was meant to be. I resigned from my old company gracefully, but firmly. The company scrambled as my absence left a significant void. The board realized just how much of the company's success had actually depended on me all along. Mark's temporary replacement reached out desperately, asking if I would help with transition details, but I politely declined. I was moving forward, not backward. A few weeks later, a leaked memo circulated through industry channels. Mark had been officially blacklisted from major firms due to the falsification scandal. His career had essentially ended. At my new company, I finally got to do something I had never been allowed to do before. I built my own team. We worked on my original predictive analytics project with freedom and creativity. The tool became even better than I had imagined. It was licensed independently, and my name appeared on every document as the sole creator. I received royalties, recognition, and most importantly, respect. My team thrived under my leadership because I made sure they were always credited for their work. No one would ever experience what I had suffered. One day, I received an email from Mark requesting a meeting to clear the air. We met at a quiet cafe near my office. He looked completely different, worn out, desperate, aged by stress and shame. He asked if I could put in a good word with some contacts, if I could somehow help him restart his career. I listened silently to his pleas. Then I told him calmly, "You taught me one thing, Mark. Never let anyone else tell your story. And I won't let anyone else tell mine anymore." I stood up, left some cash on the table for my untouched coffee, and walked out. He sat there alone, the reality of his actions finally catching up with him. Months passed, and my story quietly circulated through business circles. Industry leaders began talking about the importance of ethics and proper credit. I was invited to give a keynote speech at a major conference on innovation and integrity. Standing on that stage, looking out at hundreds of people, I spoke about my journey. I talked about the importance of documentation, of standing up for yourself, and of never compromising your values. I looked directly into the camera and said, "Competence doesn't need to scream. It just needs time to speak." The audience rose to a standing ovation that seemed to go on forever. 6 months later, I attended another tech conference as a featured speaker. As I walked through the vendor area, I spotted a familiar figure working at a small consulting booth. It was Mark. He looked up, and our eyes met across the room. His face went completely pale. I was no longer the person he had manipulated. I was surrounded by my accomplished team, by colleagues who respected me, by opportunities he could only dream about. I smiled kindly and walked past him, my head held high. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it walks quietly past you, smiling, leaving you with nothing but the weight of your own choices.